Muy buenas tardes y bienvenidos a un nuevo programa de Token City, este nuevo programa en este nuevo año 2023 y feliz año a todos. Hoy tenemos un programa muy especial y viene cargado de noticias muy interesantes y de entrevistados muy interesantes. Por un lado tenemos a Yael Bagnin, que es CEO de Token City, con quien hablaremos hoy sobre la admisión de Token City en la cuarta edición del Sandbox financiero autorizado por la CNMV. Por otra parte también tendremos a Javier de Coca Benjumea, Head of Global Ecosystem de Token City, quien entrevistará a Joel Swearing, y lo voy a leer porque tiene un cargo muy extenso. Es economista principal de la unidad responsable de la transformación digital de la industria dentro de la Dirección General de la Comisión Europea, que supervisa el mercado interior, la industria, el emprendimiento y las pymes, comúnmente conocida como la DG Grow. Pues Yael Bagnin, muy buenas tardes.
Muy buenas tardes.
¿Cómo hemos empezado el año en Token City?
Pues hemos empezado con mucha energía y con muy buenas noticias.
Sí, pues cuéntanos sobre esas noticias, la noticia de admisión de Token City en el Sandbox.
Bueno, pues efectivamente Token City ha sido admitido en el Sandbox regulatorio bajo la supervisión de la CNMV para crear el mercado secundario de security tokens. Nosotros vemos que este año 2023 marca un antes y un después en la industria, porque entran en vigor varias regulaciones, entre ellas el reglamento piloto, que permite, da un entorno regulatorio para negociar security token en un mercado secundario. Este mercado secundario es la solución a la liquidez, es la expectativa y la promesa de la tokenización. Cuando una compañía tokeniza sus activos es en busca de mayor liquidez y faltaba esta capa regulatoria que la pudiese permitir, y con esta nueva regulación y con la entrada de Token City en este sandbox regulatorio, desde luego estamos construyendo el camino para poder dotar al mercado de esa liquidez una liquidez que antes, sin precedentes, que antes no era posible tener, ¿no?
Bueno, yo creo que dentro de la compañía estamos muy ilusionados todos porque el lanzamiento de la compañía en sí fue en diciembre de 2020, no había ningún tipo de regulación. Sí que es cierto que nosotros teníamos un paraguas regulatorio para hacer las emisiones, ¿no? Las famosas STOs en compañías, y a partir de ahí pues nos hemos ido autorregulando para ir dando confianza a nivel de blanqueo de capitales, toda la parte de protección de datos, etcétera, etcétera, hasta que de repente la sorpresa de mediados del año pasado, que la Unión Europea pues tocó la campana para dar una oportunidad, ¿no? a los mercados tokenizados.
Así es, nosotros siempre hemos sido muy autoexigentes en cuanto a cumplir con todos los aspectos regulatorios existentes hasta la fecha y ser muy cuidadosos en todos los temas que tienen que ver con blanqueo de capitales, prevención de la financiación del terrorismo, en general, por supuesto, el respeto a todas las normas del mercado de valores cuando estamos trabajando con productos que puedan ser considerados instrumentos financieros, y justamente allí pues teníamos toda la cobertura regulatoria para hacer emisión primaria, es decir, para ayudar a que las compañías se financiaran, pero teníamos una limitación para permitir que esos tokens se negociaran en un mercado secundario, y es lo que este nuevo reglamento piloto y el camino que estamos abriendo con el Sandbox, es decir, con la creación de este secundario regulado en Token City, pues es lo que esto facilita, ¿no?
¿Y a qué compañías crees que puede ir dirigido esta nueva bolsa, ¿no? Este nuevo IBEX 35 de los security tokens?
Pues la propia regulación lo indica, permite tokenizar, es decir, sacar a negociación acciones de sociedades anónimas, permite la emisión y negociación de todo tipo de deuda titulizada, bonos y deuda titulizada, y permite también la emisión y negociación de participaciones de fondos armonizados.
Y bueno, pues por lo tanto es una gran oportunidad. Enhorabuena por el gran trabajo que se está haciendo a nivel de equipo, y bueno, pues por la oportunidad, y dar gracias a la Unión Europea pues por tener esa visión e ir trabajando en ese camino a la hora de la oportunidad a compañías como la nuestra.
Desde luego. Sí.
Pues muchísimas gracias, Yael, y no os perdáis nuestro programa de la semana que viene, porque profundizaremos en este aspecto, en el Sandbox y en la oportunidad que hay respecto al pilot regime para poder crear esos mercados secundarios de security tokens, para poder dar liquidez, abrir un nuevo canal de liquidez a las compañías. Bueno, pues Javier, es tu turno. Hoy tenemos a Javier de Coca Benjumea, que es Head of Global Ecosystem de Token City, quien, bueno, pues hoy nos trae un invitado muy especial, justo pues de la Unión Europea. Me encanta el programa de hoy porque gracias al trabajo y la visión que está haciendo la Unión Europea respecto al tema de la economía tokenizada, pues da oportunidades a compañías como a Token City para poder ir abriendo un nuevo camino, ser pioneros en la innovación a nivel legal, jurídico y tecnológico.
Exactamente. Muy buenas tardes, Rocío. Y eso es así. La Comisión está totalmente comprometida, o por lo menos eso es lo que vamos a pedirle a Joaquim que nos explique hoy, Joaquim Schwerin, con la visión de la economía tokenizada, algo con lo que nosotros estamos completamente en sintonía. Y yo creo que sin más vamos a pasar a entrevistarle ya hoy. Joaquim, very welcome to Token City, to the Token City space. How are you doing?
Very fine, Javier. Buenas tardes, and thank you very much for having me on the show here from Brussels.
It's our pleasure. Yeah, thank you for coming on. I thought it might be a good idea if you started by telling us a little bit about you, about what you're working on at the moment, and how did you get there?
That is a long journey, Javier. I've been working in the Commission now for 21 years, always in the part of the European Commission that basically deals with the real economy, so businesses, enterprises of all sizes. And I started with industrial policy and competition policy. Then I entered into the area of access to finance, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises. I lived through the financial crisis of 2007-2008, realizing that we have 25 million small and medium-sized enterprises in Europe that depend to a very large extent on the banking sector, much more than in other parts of the world. So with all the problems in the centralized systems, we started to look for alternatives and then took a long journey from alternative finance, crowdfunding to fintech, blockchain, crypto. And now I'm dealing with the digital transformation of industry, as we have heard in the show before, and I'm responsible for developing the token economy in Europe, especially with regard to the use cases for industry and for small and medium-sized enterprises. So that means blockchain applications, crypto use cases in all sorts of contexts, especially in the real economy.
That sounds great. I wanted to ask you, since you mentioned the beginning of your let's say your journey
Yes.
with the crisis of 2008, is it maybe around that time that the Commission started to, like you say, look for options? What's behind the sponsorship that the European Commission is doing in behalf of the application of blockchain to the economy?
Javier, there's a very interesting moment in 2008 in the middle of the financial crisis, where within 6 weeks we had, I would say, the lowest point of the traditional system in the financial crisis when we had the insolvency of Lehman Brothers. And only 6 weeks later, the Bitcoin white paper was written, which was the starting point for all the opening of the crypto space building on blockchain. And as an economic historian, I find this coincidence very intriguing because at the lowest moment of the old system, you have the emergence of a completely new system. And for us, of course, at this moment, it was difficult to see where all of this would lead to. But we have been busy for at least 10 years now in developing indeed the opportunities that blockchain technology and alternative and digital finance offer. Because forget for a moment what you read in a lot of the press over recent years when you mainly see scandals like FTX and other things that go wrong. The bottom line is, the truth is that much of the opportunities that we see are developing and will develop much more in the future in the crypto space that is emerging, specifically as this technology is really something that creates a new, a safer, a more inclusive environment for all types of enterprises, but also for citizens. And we have seen these opportunities at a very early moment. So we have been accompanying the new business models. We have tried, first of all, as good policymakers and regulators, to understand what is going on before we regulate. And then we have started building all sorts of support activities, skill development, education, financial support, but especially also then regulatory novelties. So we have created a framework which is called the Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation, the MiCA regulation, which has been adopted and which will enter into force probably in 2024, which will set a rather liberal framework for the development, issuance, trade, etc. of crypto assets in a very broad sense. And in that regard, we are, I would say, globally speaking, the most advanced big economic space in this area. Spain, of course, Javier, has a very large number of innovative startups, which are especially suited for this type of new finance, but also for the opportunities that blockchain can offer in a broader space. And therefore, I think that especially also for companies in Spain, but generally in Europe, this is a very interesting development.
Agreed, completely agreed. You mentioned FTX, cryptocurrencies and so on. Maybe it would be good if you could delve a little bit into the fact that what we are dealing with, Token City, you in particular with the Commission, I mean, with another set of regulations, which is the pilot regime. Yes. Let's say that we are talking not only with MiCA, which is for cryptocurrency, but also with the pilot regime, which is for tokenized assets, what we do at Token City. I mean, it's the same technology, it's a different world, so to speak. What can you tell us about the pilot regime?
The pilot regime forms a very important part of a legislative package that we adopted about 2 years ago, which is called the Digital Finance Package. And the Digital Finance Package is a regulatory move with a new framework that basically takes a bottom-up approach in order to enable companies like Token City and many others to offer better services for enterprises, for small and medium-sized enterprises, for startups in order to engage with investors to scale their businesses. So while the MiCA regulation sets a regulatory framework more in the traditional sense, the pilot regime that you mentioned is a sort of co-learning space where the regulators and the platforms can come together in order to develop this space together, in order to experiment, in order to have a more liberal but safe space to try out new forms of financial instruments built on a blockchain in the form of tokenized crypto assets, and then to see what are the practical issues, how can we improve our services, how can we generate efficiencies, but indeed accompanied by the regulator and not left alone. So in a way, it is a limited experiment. And I know that there are also some voices that say it doesn't go far enough, but it's a huge step forward in the sense that whereas now in the traditional capital markets, we have a number of established platforms, we enable now these platforms, but also new competitors in the space to offer to trade crypto assets and to do that in a safe and controlled manner. And this is something which I think addresses the main point, which is not only the technology, which is not only the use cases, but which is the learning that you need to make. This is, at the end of the day, a technology that only emerged, as we just saw, about 13, 14 years ago. And innovation is extremely fast in this space. So you always need to take a balance between moving extremely fast forward on the one hand side to have the opportunities, but at the same moment to have a sort of controlled experiment and also contain the risks. And this balance is what we try to achieve in this pilot regime, where basically within a limited number of years and with a limited size of exposure, financial exposure, we can have controlled experiments on issuing new types of financial instruments on a blockchain.
Completely. Yeah, I wanted to just maybe clarify or have say a little caveat that the limitations that you mentioned probably apply to the bigger corporations. In fact, the pilot regime does favor small and medium companies, which is, I think, a very, like you say, a bottom-up approach that's very welcome in the space. But coming back to the vision of a tokenized economy, I think we've probably gone through two of the main pillars. It's the MiCA regulation with crypto that does affect, let's say, the tokenized asset world. There's also the pilot regime. Is there anything else actually currently going on in the short term that the Commission is doing to favor the tokenized economy?
Yes, there's a lot of activities going on in parallel, and while finance is an extremely important part, at the end of the day with Bitcoin, all of the blockchain movement, the crypto movement started in the financial space, but the main applications of blockchain will in the future probably lie in the real economy. And apart from what I mentioned on finance, on education and skills, we have a number of platforms for use cases that we're currently developing in Europe. And I will give you one example. We are working on an infrastructure to detect fake products. 7% of our imports of goods into Europe are fake products, which causes a lot of harm to consumers, but also, of course, to the manufacturers. And you can ensure on the blockchain the integrity and the originality of a product that has been produced somewhere when it comes through the value chain into Europe and is then being sold and traded. And this system has been in emergence for the last 5 years. We have moved forward last year by selecting a use case, which we are developing in the next 2 years, to basically have a decentralized open source blockchain platform that will, in the form of digital twins, accompany all sorts of products in value chains until the point where they are sold in order to ensure that these products are not fake. This is just one example. There are many other examples of this sort that show you that this sort of database, which at the end of the day is a blockchain that can create trust, has many more applications beyond finance. And this will lead us in the longer term to what we call the token economy, where basically a token is a sort of container that moves from the real world into the digital world, and it contains certain rights. And these rights can be everything. That can be ownership of a good, of a piece of art, even of an enterprise. It can be shares, it can be whatever. And the technology basically is the same to ensure the integrity, the tradability, the efficiencies created if you have transactions like this. And this is our vision for the future, that every citizen, every enterprise, regardless of how small it is, can make use of these tokens in a very flexible and democratic and inclusive way in order to reap the opportunities. If you allow me one last remark on this, Javier, what we're trying to do in Europe is very different to what you see in most other parts of the world, where all the use cases come top down. If you look at the big techs, for example, or if you look at countries that use the technology in order to control their population, our approach is bottom up. Our approach is decentralized, taking into account our approach on data, where data are your individual ownership and you decide what you do. Taking into account the approach on digital identity, where you are in control of your identity, or at least should be, and it's the same on blockchain. So we are not prescribing anything, but we are trying to develop the space in a very progressive, pro-innovation way in order to help businesses to use the technology in the best way, as we think that the markets and the business know best what they do and not any public administration.
Completely agreed, Joachim. That's exactly our vision. I totally understand the fact that the traceability of the database, the immutability of the database allows the fractionability of the unit that is a token on blockchain. All those things combined make for a wonderful promise for the financial sector and the democratization of the economy, as you say. I don't know if we have a lot more time.
Yes.
Okay. So maybe if I can indulge you a little bit more and take advantage of you, how would you describe in a little bit more detail the benefits about the democratization of the economy? How do you mentioned that most of the funding that's available for companies, for SMEs in the European Union is bank-based. Either the bank gives you a loan or you are in a little bit of trouble. How do you see that working in the future in a tokenized economy?
It's very similar to what you do at Token City. So 75% of the financing of small and medium-sized enterprises and startups in Europe has come in the past through the banking system and mostly still is. And we need to work on the opportunity for those companies to directly engage with investors. So the basic idea of the technology and the applications is to reduce the role of intermediaries that cost time and money, and to get the entrepreneurs, get the companies directly in contact with the investors. That not only provides better access to finance, but it also provides new ideas, it provides a better discussion culture, it provides better access to markets. And this is an inclusive, a local, a very democratic approach for small companies through digitalization to enter larger markets at a very limited cost. This is what the big benefit of the blockchain technology is. So what we're talking about here is not only finance, it's not only the short-term economic merit, but it's a different form of society. And it's not a coincidence that especially in Spain, in a country where you have this so much entrepreneurial spirit also in the younger generation, is one of the most advanced countries actually in Europe, moving towards the token economy. You have it in a number of regions in Spain, you have it in Portugal, you have it in a number of other areas, and this is very much enabled by, I think, your legislation. The sandbox that was mentioned at the beginning of the show was a very good example to show how that can be used, but also companies in the space like Token City that help enterprises in making the best choices regarding their financial needs. And this is, I would say, the vision of the token economy that we share, which is pure democratization of financial markets.
Completely. We share the vision. We envision a world where companies of no matter what size, no matter how much previous funding have available resources thanks to tokenization, thanks to good regulation. And I don't know if we still have some more time?
Yes.
Okay. Regarding the advantages of blockchain, staying on that, there's one aspect of it that I think we will touch on with extensively in time, which is the fact that we can fraction an asset
Yes.
in a way that we cannot do today. How do you imagine a world, if I may for a minute, there's some hypothesis that in the future, for example, when we have real how do you say virtual worlds, right, mixed with artificial intelligence, and imagining a layer of blockchain below where transactions can be made, the possibilities seem endless. That would be like the vision of the end game. But right now, today, we have some things that are, in comparison, very small, but also very revolutionary, like the fact that, oh, I can now own a fraction of a house or a building, yes. Right? Is there anything in that sense that you can see taking place today, things that maybe the European Commission or some other institution in your opinion is trying to sponsor, or some activity that you see in that front using that? I know that there's some efforts to try to tokenize public equities, although yes. Maybe out of the scope, yeah.
There's a lot of activities going on. I give you two examples very shortly with a view to the time. One is for communities, so for public services. For example, when you have a library or when you have a cinema or when you have other shared facilities where you could engage the population much more closely through tokenization in, for example, looking at what should we acquire in terms of assets? Can there be joint ownership? Can there be a much more direct involvement of the population? So you're not only going to vote every 4 or 5 years, but basically you have a daily influence on the decisions at municipal level, which can be done through the blockchain and the tokenization. That has a huge role to play in the future, which we are currently developing. Same applies to mobility. The second example is, I would say, on non-fungible tokens, which have been discussed more or less in a financial context, but which have a lot of use cases also in the real economy. Think of arts. You have a piece of art, you watch a painting, this painting can now get an additional layer in this virtual world that you mentioned. So you can include, for example, the experience that you have on that piece of art. You can add information in a virtual world on that piece of art while you watch it. You can listen to specific music related to that. The opportunities of that are endless. The bottom line is, however, that it needs to be decentralized. It needs to be in the control of the individuals and not in the control of a central entity. Because while the technology offers a lot of opportunities, of course, it is very important that it is ensured that data are kept safe at the level of the individual, and that not, for example, the state creates a huge system where technology is abused in order to track all your movements and to control you, like is being done already in some countries that we know very well outside Europe. So there is a danger in these things which needs to be controlled, but the opportunities are so huge that we are developing the space, as I have discussed, and I'm very optimistic that we will move into that direction.
I have to say, Joachim, thanks to the European Union, we have a lot of regulations that protect the European citizenship in many domains. I don't know, communications, nutrition and foods, and so on. I'm very confident that the same will be with blockchain technology. We will be protected to be able to reap the full benefit without having to fear, some kind of dystopian states. So I think maybe we are now at the end of our time. Joachim, it was a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming on. And
we'll keep the
Yeah, thank you, and thank you to you, and we will keep the discussion ongoing. Take care.
Take care, and we'll keep the discussion ongoing. Have a good evening. Thank you very much.
You too. Bye bye.
Economistas y de esta talla, desde el seno de la Unión Europea, exponiéndonos al día y explicándonos sobre la visión, ¿no? Y sobre la realidad que tenemos a día de hoy, y sobre todo yo creo que para nosotros tres, Yael, Javier, esa visión que nació hace en 2020, que nos veíamos, ¿no? A veces te sientes un poco solo por el camino, pero cuando ves que los grandes players europeos ya fueron visionarios sobre ello y están dando esos pasos para convertir esto en realidad, la verdad es que emociona mucho, ¿no?
Estoy completamente de acuerdo con lo que tú has dicho. A mí me ha parecido que hablar con Joachim, a mí me parece una persona muy inspiradora, no solamente por su recorrido, sino por cómo traslada él la visión. Está completamente comprometido con la visión de la economía tokenizada. Él es una persona pues, que viene del mundo académico, viene del mundo, digamos, de la administración pública, pero está completamente comprometido con el mundo real, con los negocios, con el conseguir una economía realmente tokenizada y digitalizada, así que ha sido estupendo, sí.
Bueno, pues nos quedamos con esto, con el compromiso de la Unión Europea por esa visión de la economía tokenizada y todos los beneficios que puede traer para los citizens europeos, para las compañías y para la evolución general y el impacto en la sociedad. Pues muy buenas tardes y nos vemos el próximo martes a las 6:30.